Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing the challenges and providing tips for women in tech leadership. Hi, I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and in each episode, we'll hear from other successful women in tech, sharing their stories, insights, and advice. Join us as we empower each other to reach our full potential in the tech industry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. I'm super excited to speak today with Nancy Erickson, and the topic is From Expertise to Authorship, Unleashing Your Impactful Nonfiction Book. And this is something that intrigues me a lot because I think about writing a book for a while. I've been procrastinating about it. And it seems like, oh, it's so much work and how can I even do it? But we're not here to talk about me. Let me first introduce Nancy. So Nancy is an award-winning author and nonfiction book consultant specializing in transforming business leaders, speakers, coaches, and consultants into published authors. And today we'll explore the power of writing a high-impact nonfiction book to establish yourself as an expert in your field, enhance your credibility, attract a dedicated following, and help you in whatever you are trying to do, whether it's growing your career or your business. So, hi, Nancy.
Hi, Limor. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. And let's start maybe by you telling a little bit about your background and what led you to become a nonfiction book writer and consultant.
Well, like all paths in life, there's a little roundabout, but I actually started my career in high tech. And this was in 1980. I was hired by IBM as a systems engineer right out of college. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier, when I was hired, I was the only woman in the office that weren't administrators. And so here I was, 21 years old, fresh out of college, and all these men were I thought they were ancient. They were like 40 years old, and I thought they were so old. Well, they were about twice my age. But I started off as a systems engineer in our Oakland, California office, which is, across the bay from San Francisco. And I worked in tech, for a number of years. I eventually worked for Oracle Corporation and was doing really well because I was, technology can pay very handsomely, and I was earning a whole lot of money, but I have to tell you that I didn't love it. It was I was on the sales side of technology with Oracle, and there's a lot of pressure there. We have multi-million-dollar quotas, and you're trying to force fit stuff that doesn't necessarily look very smooth from the implementer's point of view. And it was just a lot of pressure, but I was making, so much money that there's no way I could quit because, you're afraid of that, what'll happen. So what happened was that about 2006, my father was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And so I did quit. I quit because we knew he would only live about 7 months. And I needed to help my parents through that time. So I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, which is right in the middle of the U.S. They were in Florida. So I went down and helped them through that time and stayed with my mom for just a little bit afterward, for the transition. And then when I came home, I was like, well, now what am I going to do? I quit my job. And it was like this big blank thing. But instead of it being like, oh my gosh, like an angst feeling, it was like, I can do anything I want now. And I had always loved to write when I was younger. And I had a couple of things published as a young adult. And I thought, well, I want to go back and get some more training in writing. So I was looking through these university catalogs. I thought, well, I've already done all that. I've already done that in undergrad. And so I ended up going back to school to get a master's degree in writing. And in the US, the master's degrees are a 2-year kind of round the clock program. And so I spent 2 years doing that. And I was so drawn to nonfiction We had to do a lot of different classes like poetry and, fiction writing, but nonfiction was fascinating to me because I think that what happens in real life is stranger than fiction sometimes and can have more impact on others. And I was really interested in kind of problem solving and helping to elevate other people who maybe were doing well, but nobody knew about it, kind of thing. So when I graduated, they asked me to teach at the university, which is maybe an advantage of being one of the older students. I'd been around the block a few times and I had a long career, behind me, so I could relate to students and also anyway, but at the same time, I started my nonfiction publishing house, Stonebrook Publishing. And the first book that we published was written by a Holocaust survivor who had gone to school with Anne Frank. And so we did the book release in Amsterdam at their school, and it was extremely moving. It was the only two things that were still in existence at the time of the Nazi occupation in the 40s was this, in that neighborhood was this school, and across the street, the bookstore. And so they conducted this beautiful ceremony for the 170 students that had been murdered by the Nazis. And then we went across the street and did the book release. And that book is called Storming the Tulips. It's still being used in the education market as a companion to the diary of Anne Frank's diary. And then the next book we published, we got back cover endorsements from Sir Paul McCartney and Cindy Crawford. And so I thought, wow, these are doing great out the chute, meaning I really figured out how to do this and make it important to the market. But there was a problem that getting more, and that was that we were interested in publishing books that would, elevate others. And we were getting manuscripts that were so poorly written that we couldn't do anything about it at all. We couldn't edit our way out of them, so we couldn't publish them. And so I took a step back. I didn't publish anything for a year. And I wrote this step by step process that takes just an ordinary person. All you need is an idea. And it takes you all the way through planning and mapping out your book, writing your draft, editing, professionally publishing, and distributing worldwide. So the writing part is called the book professor. That's the business that we focus on, helping people create these high impact nonfiction books. And then the publishing house is called Stonebrook Publishing. And so it really takes you from, like I said, your idea to being marketed and released, all around the world.
Incredible. And this is your story is so inspiring, like how you made a transition through the challenges you had and family situation with your father, and changed completely your life.
I know, but what's really interesting is life is long, hopefully. And I had kind of gotten an early start. I had my kids really early. And by the time I went back to school, I was 48. My children were out of college, so I didn't have those financial pressures. But here's the other thing, because I work with so many business executives, all of my past experience working for these huge corporations and sitting in the C-suites and dealing with those top level executives, that's who I work with now as well. And so all of those experiences have come forth. And I think sometimes we think our life is just all smeared together, but we can have chapters in it as well and continue to be relevant and to bring value to people in many different ways.
Yeah. And so obviously the podcast here about women and women in tech, and help elevating women in tech to the C-suite, to the top.
Yes.
And I can share that myself. I don't have a master's degree in writing. English is my second language. I actually didn't think I could even write, and which that kind of limiting belief changed over time. But I was like, what? Between me and writing a book, I feel like, there's a huge kind of gap.
A gap, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so
that's very common. And in fact, a lot of accomplished women would like to write a book, but the problem is they don't know how to get started. And you know what? How would you know? You're dealing in technology all the time, and maybe you haven't honed your writing skills and you haven't had to do it since you went to university, so you don't want to. But let me tell you why that's not a barrier. It's because of the way that we help, first of all, plan your book. And we don't do outlines. We do what I call book mapping, and where we create a visual representation of everything that's going to be in your book. But we start with tiny little steps. And the first is that we have you answer a series of foundational questions that are really intended to help you crystallize your message. And they're things like, why are you even doing this? What's your motivation? Who specifically is your audience, and how will they be changed as a result of reading your message? And so there's 12 of these questions, and we end up taking your answers and distilling them down into a purpose statement for the book that says, the purpose of this book is to do this particular thing for this specific audience, period. And you can't put everything you know in one book. And especially women, I got to tell you what, women are so darn capable. And I don't think that we're allowing ourselves to have our capabilities shine enough yet. Now, I told you in 1980, when I went to work for IBM, I was the only woman in our office that wasn't a secretary, or they called them secretaries back then. Now they're administrators or assistants.
Admins, yeah.
Yeah, admins, yeah. I was the only one, which, we've made a lot of progress there. But you know what? We still aren't claiming enough seats in technology. Men are dominating still, especially I see in the gaming side of technology. Men are dominating that. And we have a lot of, I think a career in tech now for a woman would be awesome, because we have so much more flexibility than we did in 1980. You could not work at home. You could not have any remote but remote access through VPNs to networks and such like that. And so and particularly after the pandemic, where in the United States, we are on total lockdown for almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. That has expanded. So it's so much friendlier for women who have a family and children and things to manage. We really handle a lot, but I think that the voices of women in technology need to be elevated, and that's what I would like to help do.
Excellent. Yes. And I'm with you on that. As a working mom, I have 4 children myself. I've never seen my kids before 6 or 7 p.m. because I was very focused on my career. And that changed in 2016 when I started working fully remote, way before the pandemic. And now I'm happy that the pandemic, at least one good thing that it brought, is that flexibility and openness for more and more employers to allow remote or hybrid mode. But that's not what we are here for, right? We want to talk about elevating the voices of those women in tech. So first, I would ask, why would someone in tech, let's say she is in leadership position and she wants to become an exec, maybe she is an executive already. Why would she want to write a book, a nonfiction book?
Well, there are probably a lot of reasons, but I would say the main 3 reasons are that you want to establish yourself as a known expert in your field. Second one is to increase your credibility. And the third is to attract a following, to be known. So let's break those down. You already are an expert in what you're doing. And women tend to have we cloak things more. We're taught to be humble and not ring your own bell or toot your own horn and those kind of things. And unfortunately, what that's done is it's caused us to take a step back. And I'm making general observations here, to step back and wait for somebody else to recognize us. Well, that's not happening. And I think that the impression is, I even mentioned it, that men are really still dominating technology. But guess what? Maybe they aren't. Maybe they aren't, and we're just not heard or seen. But when you write a book, you establish yourself as the expert in your field, and it's declared, right? It is shown, it's demonstrated through what you write and what your work and life experiences are. The second is to increase your credibility. And I want to sit here for a second. the book will only increase your credibility if it's done really, really well. And I want to make a comment about self-publishing here. People give me their self-published books all the time. I kind of don't know why, because I don't have time to read them because I'm busy working with my own clients. But I'm also really proud when that they've actually written a book. It's hard to do, especially the first time, and they persevered and they come out. But I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, people will give me their book self-published, and I'll think, please don't give this to anyone else, because you intended to increase your credibility. And right now, I can tell you by looking at the cover that you have not maybe not even just diminished it, but trashed it. There are strict conventions in publishing that you must adhere to that you're not going to know if you're self-publishing. And what self-publishing means is that you're in charge of the entire process. And how would you know what to do to do that? The other thing is that it really starts with the writing. I mean, I can tell by the layout of the book and such, but when you get into the writing, people have given me so many much that they're not edited. They have been the person's writing their thoughts and it's not edited. So it's not tight and direct. And or proofread. There's mistakes that are, peppered throughout. And you can't increase your credibility when you're putting a substandard product in front of other people. They're not going to regard you as an expert at all. And the third is to attract a following. And we live in this doggone social media world where, your face, you need to kind of broadcast yourself about. And so one of the ways that the book will help you to attract a following, which means being known, right, is that when you're finished with your book, and we haven't talked yet about the process, but I think we're going to get into that. But when you're finished, you should be, because of the way that we plan and map out your book, you should be able to take every chapter of your book and repurpose it to create other revenue producing products, whether they're workshops or seminars or keynote addresses or online courses or blog articles or podcasts. Now, in order to makes you kind of look like you're everywhere all the time. And that's how we attract a following. You kind of have to scattershot your presence across multiple platforms, because the truth is everybody's not going to read a book. So why don't we engage with them where they're already showing up and connecting?
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's say I'm thinking about writing a book, which I am personally. And let's say I have like an idea of, what I want to write about. And let's say I want to write about, in my case, how to rise from a first line manager to a second line manager. I don't know. How do I start? What do I do?
Well, I mentioned those foundational questions that help you to really crystallize your message, and we get to that purpose statement. After that, we use this process I developed called book mapping, where we essentially create a mind map for each chapter. So it's visual. Well, there's 2 of them. One involves your own personal story, which often becomes the introduction for your book. People need to know who you are and why you're in this position to be sharing this information from you. But our chapters, we start by creating them in problem solution sets. You'll name the problems and you already know these. I bet some stuff is already popping in your head, wanting to advance from first line to second line manager. What are the problems that they encounter? And then through a very story-driven methodology, you present your solutions. So by the end of it, stories are really, really powerful, and they work on us in some bizarre ways. You can be telling a story about something that really doesn't even relate to the reader, and they'll start working out their own answers. So something happens on our psychological and subconscious level that helps us to make meaning when we hear stories. So we start off, that's what we do. We map things out in the problems and solutions. And so every chapter of your book is solving a problem that they might have getting to the next level. And there's a lot of them, there could be, the glass ceiling, many things that would come into play. But when I spoke a minute ago once you have, and so what is a chapter? A chapter is just a container for information that's about the same topic. So when you're finished, let's say you have 12 chapters, you've solved 12 problems for this reader. So that's what you can take and repurpose later and maybe have a workshop on this or a seminar on that or a blog post or an appearance or even, do online training for that type of thing. If you choose to, you don't have to, but it's an opportunity that you have.
Absolutely. So why don't you talk about the steps? You mentioned the steps. So what else do we need to know?
So what else you need to know is a lot of people, you mentioned that, I'm not really a writer. Well, I'm going to tell you that you're better than you think you are. You just haven't maybe exercised those muscles in a while. And even I've worked with many people with English as a second language, and there's no barrier. I worked with one guy he's a great guy, but he has the worst grammar. I can't write a book. And I said, well, we're going to fix it all in the editing, But the way I work with our clients are in mastermind groups of like 3 to 7 people. And so every week you log into the client portal on my website. This is what allows us to work with we work with people all over the world. You log in and there's a video training for that week and homework for you to do. And then we're on once a week on a Zoom call where the whole cohort is on and we're discussing what you did that week. And so these cohorts are it's mastermind groups that are awesome. People will be contributing to your ideas. You'll be contributing to theirs. You all start off with just ideas. And at the end, you end up with books. And it really helps you to gain confidence in what you're doing. And so I told you about the first part where we're mapping everything out. So once we have it mapped out, that's where I put on my professor hat and teach you how to write compelling, creative nonfiction. And you are going to be better than you think you are. You're going to remember things from school. And the only thing that we want to do in this second module is to write your first draft. And I'm going to use a literary term here. We're aiming for a shitty first draft. And that's a literary term, I promise, quoted from Ernest Hemingway, and everybody uses it in the business. But all we want you to do is get everything off those book maps down into, I would say paper, but it's really an electronic format. And then, and all the while I'm teaching you how to write scenes and dialogue and such. And in that second module, when we're on our mastermind calls, you're going to be reading what you wrote to the group. And it's a little bit, you're going to feel vulnerable. Everybody does. But I want to tell you what that does for you. Not only does it you used to sharing your writing with others, but when you're finished with the book and it's released, it's a really vulnerable experience. You really feel like you're standing naked in public with all your skin stripped off. But you will have had a group that has vetted your material and given you, a lot of encouragement. And there's that weekly accountability to get it to keep going. So we're aiming for that first draft in the first writing section. And then the third module, I take you through a very step-by-step process to self-edit your material and to make your material really tight and directed. So when you're finished with that, you have a finished draft. Then we will do a professional edit of your book. But I'm going to tell you though, when you're finished with your own self-edit exercises, you're going to surprise yourself. You really are better than you think you are. And you've worked away at it it takes a year to go through this whole process because it's chunked in a way that really busy professionals can get it done. But there's also something else going. I mean, you guys are busy, you've got businesses and jobs and kids and stuff, but here's something else that happens. And it's this. While you're working on your book is working on you. And it starts to get its own energy and its own, it kind of becomes its own being and can start coming through you instead of something that you're just pushing out information. So you finish that third module, you have a finished draft. We do the professional edit, and then we will publish your book. And that involves a huge team of designers and layout artists and proofreaders and all such. But we end up doing, the last step we do is our legal team does the legal work to file your copyright with the U.S. Library of Congress, which protects your intellectual property.
Wow, that sounds important.
It is important.
Yeah.
And I also tell people, while you're writing your book, don't throw it up don't share it publicly in any way. Don't, because you want to protect your intellectual property, and we can't do that until the whole book is finished and we can copyright it.
So you mentioned it's a year process. First of all, it sounds like a transformational process, not just writing a book.
Well, it becomes therapy sessions and all sorts of things too.
How big is you said there's like a mastermind. How big is those groups typically?
They're usually 3 to 7. I like to land around 5.
Yeah.
And, they're from people from all around the world. I mean, we have a lot of Americans, Canadians, South African, British. I don't know. You do need to speak English.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
That's it. But we've had many authors who English is their second language, and we parse through that. So
yeah, so it's a rather intimate group.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is. Yeah.
And how much time would people need to invest? I mean, you said that the process takes about a year.
Right.
But throughout the year, what's the time investment that
that's
people
a really
have to?
Well, it differs by those modules I was talking about. The first one, where we're mapping out your book, including the hour-long weekly mastermind, I tell people it's about 3 hours a week. That's minimal, right? And that's 4 months of that. The next 4-month segment is writing your first draft. And I'm going to tell you it takes anywhere from 4 to maybe 8 hours a week. So what people usually do is block off a half of a weekend day. I think Friday is Friday a weekend in Israel?
Yeah.
Saturday. Yeah. So people do it that way, or they try to get the first hour of each morning and all. So we help you to do that because you need to be able to finish your entire book in that 16-week rough draft writing. So we do a lot of stuff with time blocking and measuring your time and to make sure you get it out and done. It's about the same 4 to 8 hours a week for that third module. So it is a commitment, and books don't write themselves. You
that's for sure.
do it, but we give you all the support and direction so that to me, it's really important to do things right the first time. And when you have those maps that we put, it's a shortcut. So what it means when you have mapped out every chapter is that when you sit down to write, there is no such thing as writer's block. I mean, writer's block is just, kind of sitting there and not knowing what you're going to do. You will do. You'll just be in execution mode.
Yeah, and it seems like your program is very structured and includes a lot of accountability side.
The accountability, which is, and I do have to say more, everybody's not going to be able to do everything every week all the time, because we know what life is like. And, if stuff comes up in business and in home life and all, there's a little bit of slide in there that you can kind of catch up and such. But you do have to be dedicated. If you're not dedicated, you won't get finished. Yeah,
absolutely. So if I'm a woman in tech, what are some of the trends you think are relevant nowadays to write about?
Well, leadership is a big one. People want to know more about women in leadership. And, it's delicate. Leadership for women is kind of delicate because there are some, gender roles that, we're trying to break. But, we need to be firm and decisive and nice too. But how to lead, people are really interested, I would say, in the topic of leadership, and also in self-development is a big one. But there's another category of writer that we work with, and that's what I call the overcomer. And these are people who have been through things and maybe suffered through things and had barriers and obstacles, and they still came out on the other side. And those kind of inspirational books are in high demand. And it's kind of like, and many of our authors who are writing these overcomer books are motivated to do so because there wasn't anything there for them when they were in that situation. So they just kind of want to reach their hand back and pull somebody else up. And whatever you're writing about, whether it's a business book or an overcomer book or a memoir or whatever, all of our books are intended to do two things for the audience, to offer them two things that I really think we can't live without. And those two things are hope and help. And so whatever you're writing, we'll have that as a goal to offer your reader hope and to give them help going from where they are now to where they want to be.
Great. I love that. Hope and help.
Yeah.
So if our listeners are considering, or they have this thing in their head, oh, I want to write a book like I do, what should they do? How should they reach out to you?
Contact me, because I would love to just chat with you about your book ideas. You can go to my website. It's thebookprofessor.com. And remember, we're about books, and I was a professor. So the book professor. And there's a link at the top navigation that says schedule a call with Nancy, and we'll jump on a Zoom call. And just to talk about your book ideas, and I could kind of maybe help you shape it up a little bit and let you know if this would be, a good process for you. I think it would be. I know you're talking to your audience now. I know you've thought about writing a book. I know you have. And probably the hardest decision is making the decision to get started. And you probably could not have made that decision until now because you don't know how to get started. Well, I have this very easy step right in and will guide you all the way through process that I know we could create an incredible book product that will do the things that we talked about, which is to increase your credibility, establish you as an expert, and help you attract a following. I don't know anybody else who's doing this, the kind of soup to nuts things, but I would love to help you. And I'd like to start that with just having a conversation.
Absolutely. I will definitely do that. And I'll put your link, the book professor, under the episode, so everyone else who are interested can book a call with you. Any last words for our audience?
Yeah, I do want to say one last thing. Many people think, well, who am I to write a book? I've only had this one life. And when people start telling me about what they've been involved in business or in their personal lives, I'm always amazed at what they've done. And they think, well, who am I to do this? And I'm like, let's turn that around. Who are you to keep that to yourself? People need inspiration. We live in a very fragmented, disconnected world, and it's hard to find things that are truly motivating and inspiring. And you're the only one who has your story, so you're the only one who can do it. And I would love to help you write your book.
What a wonderful ending to the episode. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's been a pleasure having you here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. This is your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and I want to encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Limor Bergman, and let me know, what do you think about the episodes? Feel free also to comment on Apple Podcasts and tell me, what do you want me to talk about? Which guests do you want me to bring? I really appreciate that, and have a wonderful day.